Hello and welcome to another playthrough for the 160th anniversary of the American Civil War. We're taking a slight detour away from the land battles of the Civil War to go to another 160th anniversary using the Iron and Oak system of ship-to-ship combat during the American Civil War. Now, this particular situation that comes up is coming up on June 19th, 1864, 160 years ago. And this situation deals with the action between the USS Kearsarge and the CSS Alabama. This is probably the second most known ship-to-ship battle that occurred during the American Civil War. First one being the Monitor and the Merrimac in 1862. But the Kearsarge and the Alabama faced off on June 1864 to ultimately the demise of the Alabama to the Kearsarge. We'll be recreating this particular situation, this scenario, through Iron and Oak. It's an interesting situation. If you haven't read up on the history of the battle itself, it is quite interesting. The two ships involved had a bit of a storied history, and we'll try to outline some of that here as I go along. We'll mainly concentrate on the battle itself that occurred on June 19th, 1864, when the Alabama had to sail out of the Cherbourg harbor and ultimately meet the Kearsarge to face off in a duel, essentially a duel. It was right off the coast of Cherbourg, well within visibility of the coast, and there was many spectators to the battle that took place there. The situation here in Iron Oak, pretty straightforward. We have two ships, the Alabama down here, Kearsarge up here, and they will close on each other and basically battle it out to the end, because the victory conditions, as you can see here, is to sink or strike, force Alabama to retire. There's no term limit on either of them. And the same thing for the Confederates. Okay. There are some special rules here relating to the Alabama. I'll go through those as we get into play. But it's a very simple, straightforward scenario that we'll be playing, with this. And to that end, a little bit of backstory on this, and I'm going to switch over to another book here to give you some of the backstory here. So let me get that. So here we have the Alabama with an excellent cutaway view of the Alabama itself. This was a bark rigged ship, steamship. Its primary driving force was the steam engine with a single screw in the stern that could be stopped, and sail propulsion could be used if required or needed at any one point in time. You can see it's bark rigged. You have two mainsails and then a spanker sail back here, and then you can see there's mid-range Lenten sails that help catch shore winds and other such erratic winds when sailing. It was armed with 6 32-pound cannons, smoothbore cannons, 110-pound cannon, and 168-pound cannons, heavy guns, all smoothbores. So it had limited, or I should say not limited, but less range than the equivalent rifled guns. It was roughly 1,000 tons, a little over 1,000 tons it displaced. And it was technically a commerce raider built by the British and then ultimately turned over to the Confederate Navy out at sea for its commerce raiding. And this was sanctioned by the Confederate government. There's actually documentation that this was a privateer sanctioned to raid USA or United States commerce ships. And it was quite successful. That's why this is a bit storied as well. They were quite successful, sailing out for a little over 2 years in terms of going around the world, either capturing or destroying Union merchant fleets, including whaling ships and just regular commerce ships and sailing ships all over the world. East coast of the U.S., Caribbean, South America, West Africa, and into the Indian Ocean, and all the way over almost to Australia was its reach. Ultimately, it came back to Cherbourg because it was in dire need of repairs, and it was in pretty rough shape by that point because it pretty much stayed out at sea, and very limited resupply because privateering, as it is today, was frowned upon by many governments. And when the Confederate situation seemed to get worse and worse, more governments frowned upon supplying ships like this and providing ships like this as the war went on. But in June of 1864, it put in at Cherbourg, looking to get some sort of overhaul there. There was a lot of back and forth diplomacy going on. Much similar thing would happen 80 years later with the German pocket battleship Graf Spee down in South America. But here it happened off of Cherbourg, France. Ultimately, the Alabama needed to sail, could not stay in the harbor, and it set sail. That brought us to the ship that ultimately brought it to its demise, the USS Kearsarge. This another bark-rigged ship, slightly different, a little bit more mainsail rigging rather than lantine sail rigging on here, but it was steam powered. Typical what they call sloop of war for the Union Navy. It displaced roughly 1,500 tons, and its armaments were two 11-inch smoothbores, and then one 28-pound rifle that was up front here. You can barely see it. And then four 32-pound smoothbore guns as well. So it's a pretty powerful ship, and it had some reach. That was one of the deciding factors as well. The Kearsarge could fire its rifled guns and achieve longer range hits than the Alabama. But the Kearsarge, again, was built in 1862, named after a mountain in Vermont, New Hampshire, and the name still is in use today. It's actually had there's been actually five Kearsarge named vessels in the U.S. Navy, and still in service today, and will still continue to be in service. It's one of the names that's allowed to be reused once the active ship has been decommissioned. So Kearsarge is the adversary here. Captain John Winslow was the captain of this, and he was charged with finding commerce raiders and ultimately the Alabama here. And he actually started chasing them looking for him over in Europe, and started chasing the Alabama at that point. So eventually, on a bit of luck through spies and other intelligence, the Captain Winslow was able to discover that the Alabama was in Cherbourg while he was just over in England, and was able to set sail and get over to Cherbourg in time to stand outside the harbor and wait for the Alabama to sail. At that point, he was able to attack and sink the Alabama and ultimately bring it to its demise. The Kearsarge continued on for a number of years. Actually, it had quite a number of years left in it, about 30 years before it finally met its demise on the coast of Central America during a hurricane. She was wrecked up against rocks on there and met its demise down there. So that's a little bit of the two adversaries in terms of the situation here. And just a little bit more on this and show you the initial setup here. Let me just move this book. So here we have our map, as I showed you before. Now I just show you our ships. Now one thing I have done a little bit, and I'm going to kind of pan down and zoom in. Each one of our adversaries actually has the scale model of it there. So there is the Alabama, as you can see, rigged out. I have the actual game piece there as a moniker to show which ship is what, because I know the flags that I've used on here are a little small. You may not be able to see it, but there's the Confederate flag. This is where the Alabama will start in the lower left-hand corner, and then as we move upward, I apologize for the glare there, we have the Kearsarge. You can see the U.S. flag pretty prominent there, and those are our two ships. So I will actually have the models in combat here as I try to zoom out and get everything in there. And we'll be using the Iron and Oak system, which is a very simple system to do our combat. We have characteristics cards, which I'll bring over here and show you. There's the Alabama and the Kearsarge right there. And we'll just kind of zoom in on these a little bit, kind of showing the characteristics of them. The Alabama here, showing its defense strength over here, roughly 8 and 6 for the different areas. Attack strength is 8. Over here we'll have a crack crew, and you can see it'll take 11 hits to actually sink it over there. And then there's various other damage that'll occur. The Kearsarge roughly has the same characteristics. You can see a defense strength of 8, 6 on the bow and the deck. You can see this is where the difference in the guns come in that I was just mentioning about. This has an 8 and 6 dice roll to get a hit, reflecting the little bit more quality of the U.S. guns. This takes also 11 hits to sink, in case we have a reversal of history, but we shall see. And other special characteristics over within there. So those are our two ships with their characteristics, and we'll use those as we go along in there. Apologize for that. I'm just moving that back. So with this, there's no turn limit. So we'll just kind of keep playing until one side is sunk or not. Now in the beginning here, you can see there's quite a distance away from each other before shooting actually starts. So the first few turns I'm going to play off camera just to maneuver the ships in close. Once I get them closer, I will bring you folks back on and play through the actual action there of each turn. So hopefully you enjoy this. So please stay tuned for the duel between the CSS Alabama and the USS Kearsarge for the 160th anniversary.